All right, so welcome, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adenike Huggins. I'm Senior Director, Education Policy and Advocacy, the National Urban League, and welcome to this month's webinar entitled Supporting Youth Wellbeing, Social and Emotional Learning. Our focus for this session is around positive youth development and social and emotional learning. I am excited to be joined by our two guests and presenters today, Dr. Rashida Govan and Kareem McQuilkin. So again, as you come into this space, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you are hailing from. So today we're focusing on supporting youth well-being with a specific focus on social and emotional learning. As we all know, for young people to thrive, to achieve a high level of well-being and growth, they must be deeply and truly educated as intellectuals connected to family and community. They should also experience continuous reflective development in order to achieve both individual and collective success. And uh, as the many of us who are coming into this space as practitioners, we have to ensure that the education and the developmental approaches that we are using are rooted in a series of beliefs, principles, and commitments. Many of you may know that a few years ago, the National Urban League developed a set of social and emotional learning tools for equity. That was the result of over a year of work where we engaged with over 100 people in order to learn what was and was not working within the social and emotional learning space, from practitioners, from educators, from youth development specialists, and as many people as we could possibly find. And it's actually a full circle moment because both Rashida and Kareem were involved in some aspect of that social and emotional learning project work. Um, I'll put the link to our tools in the chat, but what we created was a set of design principles and a rubric. The outline of the design principles includes promoting collective and individual well-being, growth, and success, ensuring equitable distribution of developmental resources and of high-quality learning outcomes, centering culturally relevant and resonant artifacts, as well as building on the assets and strengths of the communities that we serve. Positive identity development, so authenticity, equity, and justice, as well as meaningful engagement and leadership, from concept development to implementation. So again, not just doing things for people, but rather with people and rooting it in community. And finally, making it plain, ensuring that the language that we're using, the concepts that we're using are accessible to all members of our community. Today, both of our guests have expertise related to social and emotional learning that is explicitly inclusive of Black and Brown youth. And I'd like to take a moment to share their bios in the chat. But again, we're joined today by Dr. Rashida Govan, who is a senior fellow at the Aspen Institute at the Forum for Community Solutions, and by Kareem McQuilkin, who is the manager at We Do It for the Culture, where he works on social and emotional learning curriculum. So please join me in welcoming our two panelists and guests to today's session. All right, so as we again come into the space, I'd like to propose a few questions to get us started. So Rashida, you've been working to advance belonging, meaning, and well-being and purpose for at the Aspen Institute, the Forum for Community Solutions. What does this initiative strive to do? And what is the significance of this work, particularly for Black and Brown youth?
Thank you for the question. And I'm really just want to say thank you for having me. I'm very glad to be with all of you today. Specifically, I'm working on a belonging, meaning, well-being, and purpose strategy that essentially is focused on prioritizing strategies associated with those four constructs. Because we know that each of those constructs is connected to a variety of outcomes that are beneficial for young people, particularly people of color. So if you don't know about the organization I work for, lots of folks may or may not, but the Aspen Institute for Community Solutions essentially works across 40 different communities in across the country that are tribal or urban and rural. Our primary focus is on disconnected youth. So opportunity youth who are 16 to 24 year olds who are not in school or working. And our work essentially focuses on the solutions that communities can generate alongside young people to address their needs and close those gaps. Thank you for not making my face that big. But essentially, our work is to support those organizations in their fund development, to help them to develop strategies and collaboratives where they bring together all of these different stakeholder groups or system leads who are touching the lives of these young people. So the idea is to prevent the disconnection and also to reconnect them. Over the past 10 years of our work with these communities, what we determined was, and I was one of the communities, I was leading the collaborative in New Orleans. What they learned is that having a sense of belonging is very essential in the work that we're doing with young people. So when young people have a strong sense of belonging, they tend to graduate from high school at higher rates. They tend to have better academic performance, better mental health outcomes, and a variety of other positive outcomes that we care for all young people. Um, so we are very interested in helping organizations to prioritize that. For us, though, because we have a focus on equity and racial equity in particular, we are very focused on structural belonging. So we take the definition of belonging from the Othering and Belonging Institute, which speaks to the importance of young people and people within communities. They deserve to have a meaningful voice and opportunity to participate in the design of the political, social, and cultural structures that shape their lives. For those of us who are working in communities of color, we know that is often not the case. And often that disconnection happens because they don't feel that sense of belonging. They don't feel that they have agency over the experiences that they're having or their own lives. And so for us, it is very important that the folks closer to the problem are the folks that are at the table to make those decisions. And so that is why belonging is a very, very important construct here for us. So one, we know for all students, but particularly for students of color or young people of color, that one, they need to experience greater equity, and that means that they structurally need to be at the table designing in the design, decision making, implementation, and evaluation of the initiatives that are touching them, the systems that are touching them. But we also need to make sure that we're fostering a sense of belonging within our programs and such so that they can stay connected and persevere through them. With meaning making, that is very much focused on Black and Brown young people in particular. So the meaning making construct is really about how an individual sees themselves, sees their relationships to the community or society, and also their perception of their experiences overall. And so when we think about that, I want you to think about stereotype threat or think about things like how a person feels within institutions where they are underrepresented and how that impacts the way that they maneuver in those spaces. And so how they see themselves is a critical priority for us to make sure that they have a positive self-concept, that they believe that they have capacity to achieve, that they do in fact belong in these spaces, and that there are pathways for them to thrive. And so meaning making is about the ways in which we help young people to develop a sense of themselves, others, in their social situations that allows them to positively motivates positive action on their part. Again, I know this is long, but this is, I got to tell you about BMWP. Why this is important is because we find that meaning-making interventions have an outsized positive impact on young people of color, particularly African Americans and Latinx young people. This is critical because these types of interventions have greater impacts on outcomes for Black and Brown youth than even skills development. And so what initiatives we're talking about, culturally based interventions, rites of passage programs, mentoring programs, ethnic studies, youth organizing. So when we're talking about this work, that's what we're talking about. And with well-being, I mean, it's pretty obvious. We're just talking about the individual well-being. How is a young person actually doing mentally, physically, et cetera, but also structural well-being. So when we're talking about Black and Brown youth, again, what are the structures that are preventing them or facilitating their capacity to thrive? So many times that's access to opportunities, social connections, all of these other pieces, resources, opportunities, and personal development. If we're doing this work, for us, we say all of our organizations need to be focused on addressing structural well-being issues, because those are the reasons why our young people often are not able to succeed, because the structures are preventing that very thing. And it's our duty to address them. And finally, for sense of purpose, we are really focused on helping young people to develop a sense of purpose by engaging them in purpose exploration and purpose awareness. Activities for people of color in particular, for our young people, that really help them to develop that sense of purpose are things like youth organizing, transformative life experiences that make you realize, oh, this is what I want to do. Leadership opportunities, service learning, internships, apprenticeships. We're doing work that is helping them navigate those things, but often not doing the interventions such as reflection activities to help them to discover and arrive at that, aha, this is what I'm meant to do. Why is it important? Because people who have a sense of purpose have all of these long list of positive outcomes, including life satisfaction, job retention, better health outcomes, all of this stuff. But why this is particularly important for students of color is because oftentimes when we're doing work on workforce development, et cetera, we're not actually talking about sense of purpose. We are driving young people to industries where there's a high need, where there's high wages. Students who are coming from middle class and affluent communities are not being driven into industries like that. They're able to discover on their own what it is that they want to do and pursue that which interests them. And we know, because that leads to better outcomes for young people, why is that not afforded to us? Capitalism should not be driving the decisions that are made about where young people are able to go. And so we are saying that a sense of purpose is something that everybody deserves to explore and develop. And we're going to prioritize strategies that do that. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you, Rashida. And if she didn't mention it, and I don't think I mentioned it, but Rashida is also an urban leaguer, former urban leaguer. But we all know, once an urban leaguer, always an urban leaguer. So Rashida used to be at the Urban League of Louisiana, doing a lot of their policy work. So again, full circle, always in the family. So that was a lot, and thank you for talking us through the BMWP framework, as well as what examples of what it all entails. Kareem, I want to get to you and the work that you do at We Do It for the Culture. So you offer uh, a culturally responsive approach to social and emotional learning. Can you share a little bit about what makes your SEL curriculum different from the ones traditionally used in education settings, and perhaps even touch upon what is the significance of offering a culturally responsive SEL curriculum?
Yeah, well, thank you all for having me, and I'm grateful to be sharing this panel space with you, Dr. Govan. So I'm grateful to be here. So one of the things that make us different is we focus on adult SEL and student SEL simultaneously. I like to say you learn the work by doing the work, right? We can't expect our students to be doing this work if we're not doing the work alongside with them. So on a personal level, right, because this work is very personal to me. I'm a father of three little children, 7, 5, and 3. I taught high school for a reason, right? I explicitly did not choose elementary school. But I love my children, right? But I say that to say I'm also a husband and I'm also a professional, right? And I have a range of emotions throughout the day. So I just understand how important this work is beyond just the school environment, right? This is human work. This is work that we do every second of our lives for our entire lives. So it's very personal for me. What is We Do It for the Culture? It's a culturally responsive social emotional learning curriculum. And what makes us different is one, we're the only Black owned social emotional learning company in the grade 6 to 12 space. And I say that because a lot of the SEL curriculums out there have been whitewashed. They're not culturally responsive. And shout out to our founder, Jamila Sams, because one of the reasons why she founded We Do It for the Culture is because a lot of the schools that she was working with, they did not have culturally responsive SEL curriculums. They were using curriculums and it just was not resonating with their students. So I came along to the team about 2.5 years ago. And Jamila and I, we're both former classroom teachers. We're both district and school leaders as well. We have that experience. So we really understand what schools and districts need in order to feel supported. And when we're designing those curriculums, we're always keeping in mind how can we meet students? I like to say, like, we're pulling up on their block and hanging out with them in order to engage them in the learning, which is meeting them on their cultural turf. And we leverage YouTube content and social media content because we know that's where our students are consuming a lot of their information. So we feel and we know that if we can take some of that content and utilize people that they're already familiar with in the curriculum, then they may be a little bit more comfortable with being vulnerable to have conversations they might not typically want to have. So, for example, we have a lesson with Kai Sanat, and he's talking about his come up, right? When we were out west in Oregon, we asked students, how many of y'all know who Kai Sanat is? All their hands went up, right? And then they started sharing things about Kai Sanat that we didn't even know. But in that story, Kai is talking about how many times he failed, how many times he had to overcome challenges, and he just kept on pushing, and he just kept on posting, and he just kept on working. And he shared that facing challenges is going to be a part of the journey. So if students can hear somebody like a Kai who they see on TV, who has Nike endorsements, and they're very familiar with him as a streamer, speaking about overcoming challenges, hopefully it'll make them feel a little bit more comfortable with engaging in that conversation, because it's something that they can relate to. It's somebody they could relate to who's allowing them to have an important conversation that they might not typically be able to have. And we got tons of examples throughout the curriculum of how we leverage current events, social media, and I say youth culture to drive the conversations related to social emotional learning. And we're the only ones out there doing it that way.
Thanks, Kareem. So back to you, Rashida. What strategies are contributing to the success of the BMWP framework and the initiative? You know, I told you that I was on a call sometime last month, I believe, and one of the participants mentioned BMWP and said that in the current context where equity, social emotional learning, where all of these things are being flagged and fought against, that BMWP could actually be an approach that maybe doesn't raise red flags in the same way that equity does. And so it definitely seems as though the work that you're doing is being socialized, and you know people are gravitating toward it. But can you talk a bit about what do you think is contributing to the success of the initiative and the framework?
Well, I appreciate you saying it's a success. We hope that it will be. We hope that it is. Yeah, I was giggling a little bit because I feel like the question is absurd. Not the question, but the fact that equity is like a touchy subject. It's absurd. So I want to name that in this room because I feel like I can. Um, Having said that, I'm sorry, I'm grappling with the absurdity of that being a red flag today. It's absurd. Um, Anyway, one of the reasons why BMWP is being socialized successfully is because we're working in communities where the framework was informed by community. So I'm going to name that. So if community is already saying these kind of constructs are things that we care about, then they are more apt to begin to ingrain this language into how they talk about their work in a variety of spaces. So we're able to test that language out. And we have a lot of different types of partners. So when we think about our rural partners, um, they are coming from communities where folks are more apt to respond poorly to some of the other language, but but they do resonate. The language of belonging resonates. Well-being resonates. Purpose is very, very agnostic and neutral for people. They're like, yes, we can get around this. And they generally don't know what meaning making is. When we describe it, though, we often use things like, what is an aha moment that you had that changed the way that you operate on a particular issue? Or we might say, what is a mental block or a barrier that people have, that the students that you have, what is the mental block that they have to get through in order to get to the next level in their work? So that kind of stuff is super accessible. It really just represents the human experience in general. And people feel very much included when we talk about that framework. So, where terms like even social emotional learning is like a red flag for certain people, which is so absurd. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm in the Matrix. The terms belonging, meaning, well-being, and purpose do not have they don't get that kind of reaction. So we have been testing that in like Montana, where we could absolutely face that kind of challenge, and where we are doing work with small communities of color, lots of marginalized young people who are queer, trans youth who are really facing a lot of backlash in those communities. Using BMWP has insulated them from the types of backlash that they may have gotten if they framed it differently. The language just, again, it is very accessible. The way that we're developing it is inclusive of lots of different communities who are able to adopt the language and socialize it with their partners. But also, um, I want to say it responds to the moment. One of the reasons why lots of folks have issues around equity, diversity, and all that, well, besides the obvious, there is a segment of the community that feels very much like they are outcast, right? Like my work with rural communities, white males feel very ostracized and outcasted in those communities. Like they have things for everybody, but not us. And so when we talk, and I mean, if that's their experience, that's their reality. Um, how do we make sure that we are pulling them into the circle of care? And so the belonging work does just that. Prioritizing their well-being does just that. Creating pathways for all of our young people to discover what it is that they want to do and the idea that they have a contribution that can be made does that. And the ways that we help them to navigate that is the meaning making. So it's the language, it's who's actually surfaced the language, it's the ways that those communities have socialized that language, and the ways in which people see themselves in it is what makes it actually adaptable to this particular moment.
Got
Just
it.
want to flag belonging is a touchy one now too, but we're gonna
Oh,
push back and not
so
allow them to take that from us.
so we might be up to MWP.
I'm not changing anything. This is absurd. I'm getting off the ride.
We laugh so that we don't cry, right? Um, Thank you for sharing that and really talking about how you've been able to implement that in so many different parts of the country, and that even in rural or urban settings, that there still is a level of adoption because people are able to connect with it. Now, Kareem, you mentioned the example with Kai Sanat and how that really resonated with young people. Can you perhaps give some more examples about how youth educators and community members have been responding to the curriculum?
Yes. So I'd say generally speaking, they've been motivated, right? And they leave feeling validated, because sometimes teachers, and there's a lot of intersections between what I do and what Dr. Govan has been sharing. Um, they feel validated in the sense that, wow, like I can really show up as my authentic self when I'm in a space and I'm developing and developing conversations, right? Teaching them new strategies, helping them understand how they could implement the curriculum effectively, because they really see examples within the curriculum that their students can connect to. So they feel like they can show up as themselves. And you have teachers from a broad range of backgrounds as well as experiences, right? You have teachers who've been teaching for over 10 years and they're like, wow, I'm finally feel validated. And you got teachers who are early in their career and they're like, oh, yes, like this is exactly what I needed to reaffirm what I know will work for my students. And sometimes they may get pushed back from their school administration or their district, but we always let them know that we got their back, and we let them know that this is also grounded in research, right? It's fun and it's joyful and it's backed by research, right? Because we know a lot of times, research is important, but they leave feeling inspired. They also leave feeling like they can imagine new possibilities, right? And we really highlight the fact that relationship building is the foundation of teaching, right? If you're not able to develop relationships with your students, then you're not going to be able to teach them any content at all. And so that's the general consensus and feeling that they leave with. Now, there's also some discomfort, right? Because anything that's novel to anybody, right, that's human, is there's going to be a level of discomfort. And we hear this from some of the white educators. They'll say things like, oh, I don't know who Kai Cenat is, or I don't know who this person is in the curriculum. And we let them know that it's not about knowing everybody in the curriculum. It's about understanding that we all can connect to similar experiences, right? We really highlight storytelling when we speak about hip hop culture and the power of storytelling. So we all have experiences where we've overcome challenges, where we've experienced joy, where we've had to remain resilient. So as I'm hearing that story, right, I could have met I literally met Dr. Govan today, right? Kind of, right? But just through her sharing her story, I'm learning a lot about her, right? I didn't have to know her before I came on to this session to be able to connect to her story. I'm learning as I go, and I'm able to see the intersections between the work that we do. And something else that we really highlight, and I'm always fascinated by this, how many schools do not collect qualitative data about student experiences on a macro and micro level. I'm like, hey, let's have some co-generative dialogues. When we come out, we don't just observe classrooms or teach lessons. We want to speak with students to learn about their experience, because that lets us improve the curriculum, and it also helps us improve the professional development that we offer to schools and districts. And when those students are sharing things like the people that they're listening to, how they're experiencing advisory in terms of the way the teacher shows up, how enthusiastic they are, all of those things are very, very important, because students could be in the same school building and having completely different experiences. And it's important for us to help them unpack those feelings. And like Dr. Govan shared earlier, like they are the closest to the what we may say is the problem, right? Within education. And we know that the outcomes are not, and the opportunities that are offered to our Black and brown students are not the same as what's offered to their white counterparts. So we got to make sure that we tap in and learn more about their personal experience. And again, I'm surprised, like these are things that as I started going to different states, I started to realize that some things that was being done in my school in Brooklyn 15 years ago is just now becoming a part of the conversation in 2024, 2025. So I'm just like, yo, I got to keep saying the same thing over and over and over, because it's not as common as I would have thought. And then we also make sure that we help them understand the data, right? So we're doing some research studies, and we've learned that the curriculum not only improves teacher to student relationships, but it also improves student to student relationships. And schools always want to know, okay, we're using this curriculum, but like, what is the actual impact? And that's the greatest impact right there, improving relationships. And one example that I love to share from one of our lessons, we use a song, The Highs and the Lows by Joey Badass and Chance the Rapper. And students kind of have a debate over who has the best verse in relation to SEL. And Joey Badass shares a line in there where he says, uh, believe half of what you see and none of what you hear. The best things in life are on the opposite side of fear. And just students having an opportunity to engage in listening to music that they like, right? And really being able to break down bars and lyrics, they start to connect to, okay, what are some of the things that I might fear? What are some of the things that I need to overcome? What is my experience with that? And we always ask the teachers in the lessons to bring some of their experiences into the classroom as well. So share a time in your life when you had to overcome fear. Maybe you're dealing with something right now, currently, where you have to overcome fear. You don't got to share every personal detail about your life, right? But there are things that you can share that will make the students see you and connect with you on a human level. So hopefully they begin to see the classroom as a place where they can show up as their authentic selves and be vulnerable as well.
Thank you. And I definitely really appreciate the emphasis on, social and emotional learning being for everyone, that it's not a curriculum that you give to teachers or other practitioners for students, but it really is for everyone. And I bet that, the relationships do get stronger between the teacher and the student, as well as those students, because uh anytime when you could break something down to the human experience that we all can tap into, then it kind of creates an opportunity for connection there. So definitely appreciate you sharing that. So I have a question for both Rashida and for Kareem. What challenges have you encountered in supporting youth well-being? And then how have you or your organization navigated these challenges?
I'm gonna pass it to you first. I've been enjoying listening to you.
So I would say one of the greatest challenges is having the resources and the conditions in place for the curriculum to be successful and for SEL to feel authentic. Some schools have more school safety officers or agents or police officers in them than counselors, right? And that's an issue. Some schools want to implement social emotional learning, but they have so many, like I say, competing priorities, even though SEL should always be a priority. Sometimes they only allocate 15 minutes a day or 20 minutes a week, and they don't have the conditions in place for the curriculum to have the impact that it should have. And our research shows that it takes at least 40 to 45 minutes per week to get the impact that you need or you hoping to see from using the curriculum. So that's one major challenge. The conditions need to be present. And we have multi-year partnerships with some schools and districts. So by year, it takes multiple years to implement any curriculum successfully. People have to get used to it. And then so going into year two, often we're able to support schools with advocating for more time because they say, hey, look what's been happening in the little bit of time that we do have. So just imagine how much of a greater impact this curriculum and this advisory time can have on students if we're able to allocate more time for it. But SEL is something that should be happening in every classroom, in the lunchroom, in the gym, right, in the hallways. It should be something that's the foundation of your school community. So one of the things that we do utilize to help schools is we have foundational dimensions for success with social emotional learning. And one of those things is celebration, SEL celebrations, right? You have to highlight student work. We have a lesson where students design sneakers that deliver a message about the importance of mental health. And it may be something related to like where their family's from, right? There may be some colors related to their family, the flag that represents the country that their family was from or where they were born. There may be some designs in the sneaker. For instance, if there's like leopard print on it, it might be because their favorite movie is Coming to America, right? And then they say, okay, well, why is that my favorite movie? And you can tell a whole vivid story just from that. And but it's one thing to have students create that, but now you got to have a space in the classroom or in the school community where those sneakers are up and livening up the hallways, right? And having a little postcard next to them telling the student story of like why, what is the story behind my sneaker design? And I'm sharing that because there's some schools that do that. And when you walk through their hallway, it's vibrant, right? I can look at their walls and it just feels different when there's artwork being highlighted. Just like when I look in the back of Dr. Govan, right? Just that artwork, it makes the space feel a little bit more different. And I feel connected to that space. And when students see their work up on the walls in the hallway, they feel more seen and valued as well. And then another dimension is, like I mentioned before, co-generative dialogues. So we have and that's where students share their stories and their experience with advisory or with just school in general. And we have schools and teachers self-assess themselves at the beginning of the year in those categories like celebration. How much are you doing that? How well are you doing that? What do you want to do to improve? How much are you highlighting student voices? Okay, what are you going to do to improve in that area? And then the third thing might be, okay, getting an opportunity to see these lessons being taught in real time so we can help each other improve our implementation of these lessons. And once they set those goals at the beginning of the year, we have them come back to them continuously throughout the year to see, okay, what have I been doing to make sure I'm meeting those goals? If I'm not meeting those goals, what can I readjust in order to make sure I am meeting those goals? And those three areas or dimensions for success are the things that we utilize to ground the work that's happening in the school community. And we just continue to build on that foundation throughout the school year. And again, if we have a multi-year process, we're coming back to those things every single year.
Oh my goodness. I loved everything that you said. First of all, some more you can learn about me today is I used to teach courses on hip hop culture and did a
Ah,
lot of work on like hip hop culture and resistance. So this is like wonderful. Loving the pedagogy there. Um, But there's some things I want to name from what you just said. Like you're talking about using hip hop as a tool to explore social emotional learning topics. So that is represented, and the art pieces that you talked about, that is embedded in our belonging strategy, meaning that representation is part of the work. So when people feel connected, they feel connected to spaces when they see themselves in it. And that's important. Meaning making is in there. So how you are delivering that instruction using culture is what we're talking about when we say meaning making. So love that. And then for the well-being specifically, the well-being construct, when we talk structural well-being, that's what you were naming when you were talking about the barriers to implementing your work. So when you said there are competing priorities, there are not enough staff members who are dedicated to that work. That is like a hindrance to what you're achieving, aiming to do. So the advocacy that you are doing is exactly what we are talking about when we say well-being, structural well-being. It is our responsibility because we are close to the work. If we're on the ground with young people doing this work, we then know what those barriers are, and we have a responsibility to engage in advocacy to ensure that those barriers are removed. So one of the to your question, Adenike, one of the barriers to addressing or supporting young people's well-being is that folks that are on the ground don't always think that they have a responsibility to engage in that type of advocacy. So I have a cousin who was an educator, and we were on the phone the other day, and she was talking about a student that is very challenging for her. And I was like, oh, it sounds like this young person has been traumatized. And so what is the trauma informed practice that you're doing? And it's like, I realize that folks don't have that kind of training all of the time to be able to respond. And they feel like there's all of these competing pressures that they don't have enough time to address those immediate needs. That's a structural issue. That is a structural issue, right? So, what are the additional supports that are needed? We know who we are serving. We are closest to the challenges that they are facing. We have to stand up those issues so that they are visible to policymakers and advocate for the resources and needs of those communities and of our young people. So that is a big challenge. Is sometimes the folks that are closest to the challenges, they can see the barriers, they know exactly how to solve the problem, are often not engaged in the work of advocacy, and that is a big challenge. Um, Sometimes if they don't have the time, who are the agencies that they can partner with, like an Urban League? So I loved working at the Urban League because we were doing that work on the ground, but also had a policy arm. So when we talked with our partners who are like staff members who were doing work, we could say, listen, in these schools, we're dealing with these particular issues. We don't have enough of X, we don't have enough of Y. This is the issue. We could take that to our policy folks and advocate. So the Urban League is a really wonderful agency that can go in and do some of that work in partnership with community. So as a barrier, lots of folks don't have an entity like the Urban League that could help. So we need to figure out how to expand the capacity to engage in structural well-being work. The other thing that I think is huge um, in terms of like addressing the well-being of young people is that there's often a clinical perspective or lens that is applied to addressing the needs of young people. So in other words, we want to therapy our young people to death. And there's nothing wrong with therapy. I go on Tuesdays, it's my jam. However, there will never be enough therapists to meet the needs of our young people based on their experiences with systemic oppression. There will never be enough therapists to address those needs. And so when sometimes when folks who are working with young people see a child or children who have particular needs to support their well-being, they go, well, we can't do that. We don't have enough resources. I'm not a therapist. I'm not that kind of, I don't have that specialization, right? They opt out of even trying. But what I know is that there are cultural and community-based interventions that can do great work to address the mental health needs of young people. Most young people do not need a clinical approach, or many, I'll say many young people do not need clinical services. They could do healing center practices that are community-based. Like I run or ran a nonprofit. I founded and ran a nonprofit that's the African Center Rites of Passage program. We did healing circles. That was the method through which we delivered our instruction. And so our healing circles allowed us to address very complex challenges that African American girls were experiencing that compromise their mental health. The healing circle was a wonderful space to unpack that and to address and support their mental well-being. So there are strategies like healing circles. There are strategies like art therapy or art, like using art as a medium to explore mental health challenges or topics or address well-being. There's lots that we could be doing, but often because of that clinical lens or we adopt a medical model, we say we can't do it. And so that is one of the issues I think that is impacting our ability to really address the needs of students' well-being.
Thank you. So Rashida, when you just mentioned that and how therapy in and of itself is inadequate and insufficient to really challenge the structural issues that essentially plague us, it kind of reminded me of, I guess, a conversation that our current Health and Human Services Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., said about, sort of being how to combat racism for Black children and young Black children, that they should essentially try to be like superheroes and not necessarily let the racism affect them. And so when you mentioned, therapy being inadequate in and of itself, it sort of reminded me of that, and thinking about the fact that we have to also, resilience is a thing, grit is a thing, all of those things are things, but we also have to talk about the structural forces that are at play. And so I do appreciate the fact that you talked about that and how that is a part of each aspect of the BMWP framework. We have a few more questions, but I'm not going to ask a few more questions. I'm just going to ask one last question before we open it up and have some questions for the audience. But given the current landscape, what suggestions can you offer to our affiliate leaders as they navigate opposition to social and emotional learning within their local legislatures?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Dr.
Go ahead.
Uh, So there's a James Baldwin quote I'm sure y'all familiar with, where he says, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." And I say, and I add to that, face it with the people who are already down to do the work, right? If we spend time trying to convince other people why this work is important, I mean, I'm not saying that we shouldn't advocate, but we got to spend more time working with the people who are already investing in this work and strengthening those relationships in order to do this work that we need to do, because it takes a lot of energy and there's a certain level of stamina that we need to continue to engage in this work. And sometimes we get our energy gets destroyed when we spend too much time trying to convince others to do this work. Right now, we see in this country, there's a lot of erasure going on, right? For Black, Latino, LGBTQIA individuals. This administration is, I believe that they're winning, in a sense, the imagination war, right? Their imaginations are alive and well. Now, I believe I know their imaginations are trying to come up with new and innovative ways to oppress people, right? But our imagination to fight against that needs to increase and be activated in a way to overpower them. Right now, I believe that they're dreaming bigger in the sense of what they can do to oppress us. Now we need to dream bigger in order to figure out ways to fight back and resist. And I think one of those ways is, like we're on this call right now, right? Figuring out new ways to link up and strengthen those ties with people who are already invested in doing this work. And sometimes we end up trying to reinvent the wheel because we're not connected to others. So Dr. Govan is doing some great work with belonging, and I'm doing some, and she's maybe not working directly with schools, and I'm working directly with schools. Now we figure out a way to intersect the two, right? And then figure out new ways just to imagine possibilities for our young people and for us as well.
Oh, you said a mouthful, and I agree completely. I'm trying to breathe through the Robert Kennedy quote because that kind of took me out. And I'm going to say this for my own well-being because that is a priority for me. I am not a superhero, nor our children, nor any other Black and brown people in this world. We are not superheroes. I am a human being. They are human beings. And I will not submit to any notion that suggests that we perform beyond what is humanly possible because people wish to maintain their ability to be racist and to be oppressive. So I just denounce that. I want to say that outright. And to that point, when we think about doing this policy work, our advocacy needs to be aligned with what Kareem said. We cannot waste a lot of time on people who are just, adamantly against our position. We have to find people who are allies and build those alliances and start on the local level. This is a moment, the opportunity that this moment presents is one in which we can find new allies. So there are lots of people who are being impacted by these poor policies, these problematic policies, who maybe have not been in alliance with you. You have an opportunity to build relationships and alliances there. And that way, when you step to state legislators about the work, you may not undo it, but you maybe can stop it. Like you might not be able to change their mind, but these new alliances and new partnerships can help to block, to prevent them from being like these policies from being like introduced. It might not get out of committee because the relationships, these new relationships, um, include people who are closer to those folks who are making those decisions. There's a lot of opportunity here. So this is a moment to find new partners where we can find common ground around our basic human needs. It's a wonderful opportunity to do that. The other thing that I will say is while you fight that policy fight, you got to fight the narrative game. And so when Kareem was talking about the ops imagination, we have to be thinking about what new narratives that we need to surface. This is a part of our belonging work, is like really dismantling the othering narrative. So in their imagination, there is a definite evil, there's a definite villain, And oftentimes it's people who do not have the same identity or who do not have the same experiences, who are not the same as whoever the ops are. You just pick one. Our objective is, in part of the policy play, it's not going to be facts that change people's minds. They do not care about facts. It's not going to be direct confrontation. They do not respond well to that. Human beings do not respond well to that. But what they do respond to are narratives that are accessible, that they can see themselves in, right? And so, for instance, as an example, when we talk about disconnected young people or young people we identify as opportunity youth, lots of what is said is they are, some of the language that we used to use is language like they are, what was the word about like some word that we used to use to describe kids as being at risk. That's it. At risk young people. And it really created a narrative that said that they were the problem. We turned that on its head and said, everybody can remember what it took to transition into adulthood. We all know what it took, and everybody deserves a runway with supports to stand them up. Everybody deserves that. We all needed it, right? And so it just actually takes this young person now out of this at risk category and puts them in with everybody else. We all needed support to stand up and to launch. We need a runway in order to launch. And so what are the resources that we need to create that runway for young people? Now they're not an other. They belong to the community. And so we have to think about what those new narratives are that are inclusive and that bring people in rather than confront. I don't like it because I like to confront. I'm from Jersey. But it is important for us to understand how humans think and understand that the narrative game is that's the war we have to win.
Thank you. So now I'd like to ask some questions of our esteemed audience members. So many of the people who are here in the room with us today are part of our Project Ready community or the Urban League movement at large. And so I think with the perspective that Rashida has, the perspective that Kareem has, we could really share and learn and combine some brain power by you all being able to, to help folks along their own journey. So I'd like to ask anyone who's willing to share, where are you in your journey to support youth well-being?
I can kick things off. Andrew from the Urban League of Greater Madison. Hello. We've been doing a lot of SEL work for at least the last 5 to 10 years. Most recently, the tool that we've been using is the mini DESA and the full DESA and the resource library of lesson plans that they kind of bundle along with that product, though we're losing access to that system through our current access point at the end of this school year. So we're kind of looking at other possible alternatives in terms of both curriculum, but also kind of, without sliding into the clinical stuff that you mentioned earlier, a good kind of assessment tool to assess the impact of the SEL work that we do with the students that we work with.
Thanks, Andrew. And I know you said that you're going to lose access to it and that you're also trying to find ways to evaluate the impact. Rashida and Kareem, can you share any kind of insight, as Andrew continues to work, continues to make the case for why this is important, but is also faced with, losing some access to it? Can you share a little bit of insight with him as he progresses along his journey?
I actually just came from a conversation about this in the previous call. And one of the things I want to be honest about is what we are in right now, right? There's going to be less and less access. In fact, I just saw something about something else being wiped from like federal websites, data that is just no longer available. those things, that is a reality we're going to have to deal with for some time. Hopefully not too long, because we shouldn't stand for it. But it is a perfect time for us to really expand our local capacity for data collection and reporting. And so this is a moment where we have to look to philanthropy. Second time I'm saying this today. Repeating it to myself, because I'm like, I need to go talk to funders about this. But we are really going to have to ask philanthropy to lean in to investing in data capacity for all of our nonprofits. And also we have to push on our local municipal government to invest in that way as well. We have way more control over that and access to those players to get that moved. So that's one. Two, for our individual program level data, one of the things around SEL that I will name is that lots of times our program indicators are not aligned with, do not prioritize SEL at all. But we know that work is impactful on all of those other indicators. So including some measures or items that examine social emotional learning outcomes or experiences for young people, you can use that not as a proxy, because it is a mediator to all the other stuff, right? So if you think about a sense of belonging or identity development and sense of purpose, all of that stuff leads to program retention, better academic success, and all of that stuff. So by including in your existing evaluation protocols a few items that ask those questions, you're able to show a relationship between those outcomes with the performance indicators for which you're being held accountable. And so that allows you to begin to make the case for why that data is important, and builds it into like how you are being examined. That supports the work that you're doing. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add is you may already be doing this, but really trying to find ways to highlight and share student stories. Maybe it could be through video recording, it could be through writing, just different ways to allow students to serve as advocates for why this work is important and the impact that it has had on their lives in a story telling type of way. And then I also say, just for myself, as I'm listening to Dr. Govan speak about the being active within the community, that's something that I believe that's something that I'm currently trying to learn more about as well. So I say that to say we could even create spaces to like thought partner around that very question that you proposed, Andrew. I think that would be just a powerful learning opportunity. So I'm not sure if the NUL may already have that that offering or have that in mind, but I think that would be something for people across the country, including myself, to learn more about. Like, how do we proactively advocate within the community on a local level? Because sending emails, making calls, sometimes it could just feel like overwhelming, or like, man, how do I cut through this? Who do I need to speak to? And I think we need a playbook for that, because when I lived in Brooklyn, I grew up there. I had so many connections there. It was easy to navigate. But now that I moved to a new city, I mean, I could look things up, I could do research, but it becomes a little bit more challenging to navigate those the bureaucracy.
And I think that I want to just add, like what Kareem you just proposes, it makes a lot of sense. And I would add another stakeholder that needs to be in that conversation are academics, because they are often the folks who are like giving us the evidence that our stuff is working. And they also have an investment in that problem being addressed. So just don't forget the academics. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Rashida and Kareem, for the insight. We have time for just a few more questions from the audience before we wrap up for today.
Rashida, this is Key from San Diego. We've been working with Opportunity Youth since 2017, 2016, and we used to go to the convenings at the Aspen Institute. And do you guys still have those?
Our
Where maybe
next one is May 19th to the 21st in LA.
Oh, wow. Okay. I need to get that information. It used to be
Yeah,
really helpful. There were helpful tools to work with some of the youth. And right now we have a grant from San Diego Foundation to do just what we're talking about today. And that we felt like that was the missing piece. And so that is something that we're building with a couple of other nonprofits here in San Diego, working with the foundation.
All right, so Adenike, make the connect, please. Yeah, for sure. May
Will do. We
19th to
we
the
were just
21st.
talking about the spring meeting. I actually went to the one in the fall, which was at the Aspen Institute. That was in October.
I'll make sure you get the info, both of you.
And we used to go with the workforce partnerships, but that's a whole nother conversation in this climate.
Always is. Always is.
Hey, my name is Frank Bouye. I'm with the Urban League of Middle Tennessee. We're in Nashville. And so for someone who's starting up a lot of the programs from an educational perspective, you speak of curriculums, you speak of a lot of different experience where you guys have been working with other organizations. And how do I get that type of information so I can sift through it and say, okay, we're going to follow these and we want to incorporate this. And you know, I'm talking to literacy groups in across the city, and I'm working with my brother's keeper, and I'm working with the public school system, and I'm working with, and we're kind of, you know, hey, I like this, I like that. I'm going to take this, I'm running with it. You know, person from the literacy organization, and I loved everything she was saying, and I'm like, I'm all in. But as I pull all this together, it would be good to have a repository of information and curriculums to say, this has worked here, this has worked there. We probably need to incorporate this. We just hired a young person who's going to be in charge of a lot of our mentoring. So as I continue to expand what we're doing, it'd be good to have some of those learnings that you guys have talked about today. Is there a repository for all of that?
Adenike just dropped something in the chat that I think is a valuable tool. You want to say something? Yeah.
Yeah,
sorry.
so that I referenced at the beginning, the work that we had done around social and emotional learning and really trying to approach it from a community-based lens as opposed to creating it in a vacuum. And so that what I shared in the chat is the link to our page, which includes the rubric, it includes the principles. And while it's not a repository, I do think it could be a good set of tools that you might use to help and evaluate new curriculum that you might be interested in implementing or that you might have heard a spiel about, but you're like, but does it really work? And so I think using the rubric, you know, to sort of evaluate it and see where it is on the rubric. And then even as you maybe will cobble together different resources, different modules from different organizations, how you could also undergird that using the principles that we develop.
Thanks. I just copied the link. I'm good.
All right.
Hi, my name is Tanya, and I'm from the Urban League in Atlanta. And I have a question. This is for Kareem regarding the We Do It for the Culture.
Yes.
Is that, you kind of mentioned it's like a curriculum, is that correct?
Yes, it's a curriculum for grades 6 to 12.
6 through 12. How do we get access to that?
Yeah, so well, I'll drop this bit.ly that has a few resources in it related to it has our website in there and a one pager and some additional info. But you could get an individual subscription. You know, we can meet offline, like on a Zoom, and I could share with you how you can access an individual subscription. And then if you feel like you or your team or whoever will be implementing it needs some training, then we could provide training as well. But it's accessible. You don't even need me to access it. You could just go on the website and get it. But then I'm also here to support in any way that I can to make sure that it's implemented with success.
Okay, wonderful. Well, can you also put in the chat your email so I can follow up with you?
Yeah, I would love to follow up. I'm down here in Atlanta, and one of the things that we do that I know is a little different than other curriculum companies, like we come in and we get in front of the students and we'll teach lessons and we'll engage with them. So I'm down here. So if I need to show up in person, I'm down to do that in any way that I possibly can. And we're a small company, so we're very flexible and we get creative in the ways that we can support.
Okay, perfect. And I apologize about not being able to use my camera. You know how we multitask, so appreciate. I also wanted to say to the team, I really appreciate this information, and it is very much needed, specifically when we talk about the social and emotional status of our youth and young adults. We really have to focus on that and make a difference in their lives, because it does sound like a cliche, but they are our future. And we want them to be healthy. And I say holistically healthy, with the mind, body, and spirit all connected.
Yes. Yep. This is soul work, right?
Yes.
It's way
yes.
deeper than what we can see with our eyes.
That's right. But thank you all.
Thank you. And you're welcome.
And Kareem, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have done work with some of our affiliates, right? I think one of my colleagues, Kwame, connected, and there has been some work at the affiliate level, I think, with our youth workforce, our Youth Pathways program, right?
Yes. Yep. Thank you for highlighting that. Yep. We're working with the NUL in Austin, Houston, and I believe Dallas. Yep. So in those 3 cities in in Texas, we did some training with them virtually. I think Jamila met with them in person once. So we are out there, and we hope to continue that partnership.
All right. So again, thank you all for attending session 2 of the Education and Youth Development webinar series. I hope that you all were able to learn more about the tools, the resources, and the strategies that can be used to support youth well-being. Remember that the National Urban League social emotional learning tools for equity are available on the website. I did put the link in the chat. And you can also look up the belonging, meaning, making, well-being, and purpose framework, as well as the We Do It for the Culture SEL curriculum. I think Kareem has put that in the chat. As
I
a
put the
reminder,
primer in the chat as well.
you put the primer in the chat too. All right, so there you go. As a reminder, our next session is titled Navigating the Current Moment, Continuing Equity Work in the Face of Hostility. And that's going to be on Wednesday, April 16th at 3 p.m. Eastern. That session will be followed by one entitled Addressing Chronic Absenteeism, What is the Role of Educational Spaces? And that's going to take place on May 21st at 3 p.m. Again, everyone, thank you all for your time today. As you know, this is being recorded and it is going to be uploaded to the National Urban League YouTube page. I'm going to drop the link for the playlist in the chat now. The first session is currently on the playlist, and this session is going to be added there shortly. But again, thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate your time today. Appreciate the energy. Take care, everyone. And I hope something has made you smile for today. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you all.
Thank you all. Have a blessed evening.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
Yes.